Coming up on today's show, we are going to talk to you, better yet, Heather Rollins and I are going to talk to you from Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Nebraska about the ICHRA plans. What does that mean? Individual Coverage Health Reimbursement Arrangement. That's what that stands for. In Nebraska, it's called Personal Blue. You're going to learn how to control your health care cost if you're an employer and how to save money and offer better plan. Stay tuned, listen, and learn.
And now, America's healthcare advocate, Cary Hall.
Hello, America. Welcome to America's Healthcare Advocate Show, broadcasting coast to coast across the USA here on the ICHRA Radio Network. You can learn more about us by going to our website, americashealthcareadvocate.com. You got a question or comment, send it to me. By the way, our YouTube and podcast numbers, 653,000 downloads, all of you out there downloading this show. I just want to say thank you. It's amazing to me. I never expected us to have this kind of an impact. A lot of that has to do with our producers, Garner and Dave, here in the studio, and what we do here with Garner Cowdery and Dave Thiessen, who does all the podcasts and YouTube stuff and puts it up there. But thank you all very much. I'm glad you think enough of this show to have that many downloads. We do try to educate and inform. That's what we do. And today, we're going to educate and inform on a topic called ICHRA. And that's a new concept in small group, large group, medium-sized group health insurance that we're going to talk about in studio today with Heather Rollins. Welcome back for the... how long have you and I been doing this?
Oh, my gosh. Years. At least 15 years.
At least 10 or 12 years, at least.
I want to say.
First at Blue Cross of Kansas City and now here at Blue Cross of Nebraska. So it's going to be an interesting show. Stay tuned because you're going to learn about this. If you're a broker or you're a, you're an employer, this is something you want to learn about that's the purpose of doing the show today. Obviously, for the folks in Nebraska, but we're going to run this show nationally because we think it has a lot of information. It's good for everybody. Let's roll right to this, Heather. Let's just talk about what's going on in the marketplace and what kind of, actually, in my opinion, necessitated something different. So let's talk just about, why are we doing this and why is this important?
Yeah, so, we're starting to see for employers, the annual increases year over year are starting to increase at an extreme rate where employers are getting to the point where they just simply cannot afford it. And so we're looking at alternative solutions. What's another strategy for those employers? When you're thinking about a year over year increase of 25%, for a small group employer, that might not be sustainable over time. And so how can we create some budget stability, being able to level out those increases and continue to support employers so they can continue to support their employees by offering a benefit package. And so even though I say 15 to 25% annually increase, that's on average. We've seen groups that are giving 50% increases, 100% increases. And so we have noticed in the market that, over time, group rates are continuing to grow. How can we give that employer some relief by giving them a budget program? And we think that's something that the ICHRA solution can provide. And so with that ICHRA solution, I know we're seeing ICHRA, but that's Individual Coverage Health Reimbursement Arrangement. This is a funding program where that employer can say, I just want to set up some type of budget, still be able to offer my employees money so that they can take that money and buy insurance that best fits their needs. And so not only are we creating a predictable model for that employer, we're also giving those employees additional options where they can go choose an individual plan that fits their needs for their employees and their families, and it works for everybody. It's a win-win situation for everyone.
It is, and in Nebraska, it's called Personal Blue. That's the name of the product, which is the ICHRA product you just heard Heather describe. I'm not even going to try to go back through that acronym. She did a really good job of it. I don't want to screw it up. But the thing that's important to understand here, two pieces out of this that Heather just mentioned. Number one, you can't sustain a 25% increase. You're an employer, you think about it. Let's say you're a manufacturer. If you got a 25% increase every year in the goods raw goods you had to buy to create whatever you're making, you got a problem.
Absolutely.
And this is the problem with health insurance. Even if it's like a level premium plan, they may run really well for a couple of years. Then you have a bad year with claims and then bam, it blows up on you and you have to go find something else. The point here, Heather, and you really kind of laid that out, is long-term stability.
Absolutely, absolutely. Employers are getting to a point where they're just saying, hey, I would rather just not offer insurance altogether. But what does that do to an employer? It's hard to retain their employees. Their talent might go somewhere else. So those are the things employers have to think about and decide what's the best solution for them.
Well, and the other thing is, you're a medium-sized company or a small business. You're competing in the same area that maybe larger companies are, that maybe have a fully self-funded platform or some other platform where they can control their cost. You're at the mercy of the plans. You can't do that except on a plan like this. And the other point that's important, we'll get into this a lot in the next few segments, but what Heather said about it offers employees a chance and an opportunity to decide what plan they. So, how many different plans are we offering on Personal Blue in Nebraska? Just to give an example.
In Nebraska alone, we're offering 17 different plans across the state.
Yeah, there should be something there that fits everybody's needs. I like to say, a size 44 overcoat doesn't fit anybody. That's not what they're doing here. And the good news is, on these ICHRA plans, the Personal Blue plans specifically, the choice gets made by the employee.
Correct.
The employer gives them the money. Say, here's your $500, $600, whatever it is a month, $300, whatever it is. Now it's up to you to go see how you want to spend it.
Absolutely. Because if you think about the dynamics of a family model, right? You have a young employee. I'm not young anymore, but...
Oh, you're young. Believe me, you're young, Heather. Trust me, you look very young. You are young.
Thank you. Let's say you have a 25-year-old employee, right? That employee doesn't need the same level of coverage as a mom who's 35 with 3 kids and a husband. So, you are giving them the choice to be flexible and choose what works best for their family needs. So that 25-year-old young male might not need the level of coverage as that 35-year-old mom, right? That 25-year-old male is only going to the doctor once a year, so they might get a bronze level individual plan, whereas the mom of, 3 with a husband might want to buy up to a silver or a gold. So you as the employer are giving your employees that choice to take that $500 contribution to say, hey, I think the best solution for me is this bronze level plan, or it could be the silver level plan. And so there's a wide range of options, 17 different ones in the state of Nebraska. So
there are blue plans all over the country that are offering these. So if you're a broker or you're an employer out there, and yes, we are speaking specifically to folks in Nebraska, but you're around the country someplace else, it would be a good idea to see if your local Blue Cross and Blue Shield is offering one of these, if you want to look at a solution that's going to be different than what you're doing now. So, I think when we come back from the break, we'll start talking about, the actual plans and how they work. But this is not just for large employers. This is for small employers.
Absolutely.
And that's really the kind of the place in the market that I see having the biggest impact. And you're the one out there talking to the people. But it seems to me that the small employer is one that's getting hit the hardest with the fewer options to do anything in the current marketplace. Is that reasonable to assume that these are really kind of targeting the smaller employers that are looking for some kind of relief?
Yes, absolutely. Because if you think about the full makeup of a traditional group plan, right, and you have a small employer who, let's say, they only have 10 employees, it would only take one of those employees to have a bad health year, and then all of a sudden that increase is getting higher and higher each year. So rather than them have to face that instability year over year, not knowing what the renewal increase is going to be next year, you can take that money that you're giving them on that traditional group plan and say, hey, here, I'm going to give you this money to go shop on the individual plan. And the good thing about the individual plan is year over year, those increases are a lot less expensive than the group renewal increases. So with the exception of 2026, the individual market only had an increase of about 4% year over year. And you compare that to the 25% on that traditional
it's a little
plan.
Different.
It's a little different. Yeah. So now it's becoming more attractive to say, hey, this is a new strategy and a new solution for those group employers.
And we think it's important for you to know that that's why we're doing this broadcast today. So all of you out there across the country and specifically in Nebraska can learn about Personal Blue. But if you're somewhere else in the country, your Blue Cross and Blue Shield may well be offering this. You might want to take a look at it. We'll be right back after the break. We're going to get into what we call defined contribution. What is that? What does that mean and how does it work? You know what it is if you have a 401k. We're going to talk about how that affects ICHRA and Personal Blue. Stay tuned. We'll be right back after the break. You're listening to America's Healthcare Advocate, broadcasting here on the ICHRA Radio Network, coast to coast, across the USA. Stay right there. We're going to be right back. Welcome back. You're listening to America's Healthcare Advocate Show, broadcasting coast to coast across the USA. In studio with me, Heather Rollins from Blue Cross of Nebraska. We're talking about a product called Personal Blue. It is an ICHRA program. We talked about that in the first segment, so you know what that is now. If you want to learn more about this, the phone number is 888-391-8532 in Nebraska, 888-391-8532. The website, nebraskablue.com. You can actually get a quote up there if you want to do that. But nebraskablue.com is the website, or if you want to just call and be able to talk to Heather or one of their representatives just to explain this to you. Listening to the show, you're getting a lot of information, but if you have questions or want to know, well, how many of my employees, whatever, how would this work, they're happy to chat with you. Once again, 888-391-8532. All right, so one of the things that I think is interesting about this, and I walked out of that last segment and talked about it, is this is really kind of like a 401k when you talk about defined contribution.
Absolutely.
I mean, in other words, the definition of defined contribution used for 401ks. Talk about that and how this is similar in the respect of defined contribution.
Yeah, so what we're saying is, okay, for the employer, you get to set what your cost is going to be. Rather than someone coming to you to say, hey, you're having to pay this amount of money for your employers, you're having to contribute this percentage for your employees, you have to participate at this level. None of that applies here in this type of model. So in this model, we're saying, okay, employer, what do you want to set your budget as? Let's say, for example, over the year, you want to spend $1 million evenly, for the year on coverage. So we would take that amount and we would say, okay, how many employees you have and divide that in the months. So we're saying, okay, I'm just rounding here, $500 per employee. So that is the defined contribution. As the employer, you're saying, I'm offering $500 for my employees. They then turn around and take that money. You will fund that account, and those employees get to choose which plan that they want to select.
Now, they cannot take that money and go buy a cruise at the end of the year.
Correct. They cannot. They cannot.
I want to be clear on this, okay? You cannot take that money and set it aside and then go use it to buy your cruise on Carnival Cruise, okay? It's a little different deal, right?
Yes, that's a different deal. So, that employer is saying, hey, I'm offering you this $500. You can take the full $500. Sometimes those employees might choose a plan that's less expensive. Whatever is less expensive, that money does still go back to that employer. So there's opportunities for that employer to continue to save money, but you're setting that budget year over year. And so you can set up a budget for 3 years and say, hey, I'm only going to contribute this amount of money over the next 3 years. You set that cost, you set that fixed budget, and you know exactly how much you're going to pay.
So let's go back to something. This is important. So on the ACA models and on the current small group policies that are out there, level premium, go through the whole whatever. Okay, there is a participation requirement. Absolutely. So now we'll go back to this 10-life employer, and you come in with the renewal premiums for a standard type small group policy, and they're up 25-30%, and the employer goes, I don't know how we're going to do this. Okay, I'm going to try to do this, and I'll offer this or this, and then they go to the employees, and the employees look at it and go, we can't. I can only contribute 50% as an employer right now, and that's all I can afford. You have to pick up the other 50%, and you're going to see people fall off like they're just going to walk away, and especially when it comes to their families, because they're not going to get any kind of assistance. This is a different deal on the Personal Blue. So just talk about that a little bit. No, there is no participation requirement.
Right. So, when you run into those situations where those rates are getting higher, and those employees are faced with, okay, my employer is only contributing 50%. That means my cost is, upwards of $600 to $1,000,
Yeah.
And so those employees might say, hey, I'm just not going to select coverage. I'm waiving for the year. Well, if you get below a certain amount and you don't meet that participation requirement, that carrier can say, hey, we don't want to offer you this coverage. Now you're left without coverage. Well, the difference on the individual Personal Blue plan is that now you don't have to worry about those participation requirements. If you have 5 employees and, they are low wage, they don't have a lot of money, this would be the perfect and ideal situation for you, because now you can just say, hey, 3 of the 5, let's say only 3 can enroll or want to enroll. Maybe the other 2 are currently with their spouse's coverage plan. That's okay. We do not set a participation requirement, and we don't require those employers to have a certain contribution amount depending on what size they are. So we can talk a little bit more about that in another segment. But, if you're under the size of 50, you don't have to have a certain contribution level. So that just continues to help you from a budget perspective.
And people that don't enroll don't get the subsidy from the employer. Am I correct? I mean, they're not going to, I'm not going to enroll, I'm going to take the $500. No, you're not.
No,
you have to use the money for health insurance.
Correct.
So you have coverage. Okay?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
You touched on something in the first segment. I want to kind of go back to it a little bit. If you're a small employer, and again, you're competing with other businesses that do what you do, if you don't offer benefits, the second question, you look at a national survey that people ask after, what am I going to get paid? What are my benefits?
Exactly.
And if you lose those health care benefits, you're losing a whole segment of your workplace employees who are going, well, I'm not going to work here. I can go down the road and get a health insurance plan from this other employer. Yada, yada, yada. So it's a risk to employers.
Absolutely, because if you think about employees, their most expensive cost probably is your health insurance.
Without a doubt.
So it's very important in a household to make sure that you're having health insurance, and that's the most expensive cost for employers as well. And one thing I do want to add is that even if you're thinking about employers and you're a new business, this would be a great opportunity for a new business who does not have a clue about, traditional group plans. This would be a great opportunity to get into this market. That's how the market is expanding with ICHRAs and Personal Blue.
Yeah, it's really starting to gain traction.
Exactly.
And the good news for employers is they're able to say, we're offering health insurance, and you come to work here, here's 17 plans. You can pick the one you want.
Absolutely. And especially if you think about certain industries, right? You have restaurants, right?
Oh,
the turnover is
hospitality.
high.
Oh,
exactly.
Yeah.
One of the ways that you can keep those employees and that talent there without having that high turnover is offering them some level of health insurance. And so being able to offer that defined contribution is one way you can keep that talent to say, hey, you go to another restaurant, they're not going to give you insurance, but we have this insurance policy, and that's just another way to keep that.
Yeah, it is, and it's worth the investment because you're going to attract a better quality of employee.
Absolutely.
And that employee is going to stay there longer because they're getting, they're getting benefits because the employer was smart enough to offer it, whereas the guy down the road or gal down the road may or may not be doing that. So it makes a big difference to them. If you want to learn more, once again, the website is nebraskablue.com for all you folks in Nebraska. The phone number is 888-391-8532, 888-391-8532. Give them a call if you just want to learn. Maybe you want to have Heather or one of her representatives come out and sit down. Tell me how this would work. How do I explain this to my employees? They can do it, okay? And they will do all that. All right, when we come back from the break, we're going to talk about where the rubber meets the road. We're going to show you, there's an old adage in this business, you can't manage what you can't measure. We're going to show you a case study where they saved a lot of money, okay? And you're going to understand a lot better what we're talking about here, and we convert this into real dollars and cents. Stay right there. We'll be right back after the break. You're listening to America's Healthcare Advocate, broadcasting here on the ICHRA Radio Network, coast to coast across the USA. Once again, that phone number in Nebraska, 888-391-8532. We'll be right back. Welcome back. You're listening to America's Healthcare Advocate Show, broadcasting coast to coast across the USA here on the ICHRA Radio Network. If you have a question or comment, send it to americashealthcareadvocate.com. I'm happy to help you. In studio with me, Heather Rollins from Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Nebraska. They are pioneering, along with a number of other Blue Cross plans across the country, the ICHRA product. They're calling theirs Personal Blue. We've been talking about it now for the last 2 segments of the show, talking about what it is, how it works. Now we're going to actually show you real demonstration of what this can do if you're an employer. Heather did a study, and this is an actual client. And I think you're going to be surprised when you see this, because I think until you actually understand the impact of how this can change your costs, this is going to be impactful. So Heather, why don't you just take it and let's walk us through how this worked and what happened here.
A client of ours came to us, and they have about 140 employees across 4 different states. We're going to call them ABC Manufacturing.
So wait a minute, I'm going to stop you right there. You were able to write the plan even though the other employees weren't in Nebraska.
Correct.
Okay, that's
Correct.
important.
The employer is based out of Nebraska.
Correct.
And so that allows us to give them a quote. And so when we generated the quote, the reason they came to us is that they were experiencing a 24% increase. So their overall renewal rate for their traditional group plan was about $1.8 million. I'll say $1.9 million a year. And so they were looking to find some relief. How can we save on overall premium? So we generated a ICHRA feasibility analysis. And so that's something that we'll do with all of our employers.
Do you have to be 100 lives to do that?
No, only 50 and above.
Okay.
To do the full, consultation, looking at each of the employees, where they're residing, looking at all of the different benefit plans.
But you still offer it below 50, obviously.
Correct. Absolutely. It's just that you don't have to go too far in detail when they're under 50.
Correct.
But if you're over 50, we really jump in and do a deep dive just to make sure that employer understands where their employees are moving to, how we're transitioning them, and the overall difference between that budget line item, right? The overall cost. And so what we do, we take that ICHRA feasibility analysis, we look at age of their employees, the location of those employees, and again, what that overall contribution from that employer is. And so when we took that quote, comparing to their traditional group plan, our overall cost for a gold plan for all of their employees was going to be on a yearly basis $1.4 million. And so overall, we noticed that there's about over $250,000 in savings per year for that employer. Now, of course, if you're looking at that and you're saying, okay, year over year, 25% increase compared to our individual market, and you're saving $250,000 over a 3-year period, we noticed that employer was going to save $1.5 million in 3 years.
That's unbelievable.
In 3 years.
You don't realize how fast this adds up. And by the way, the number is actually $254,528.
Yes.
Okay, to be specific, okay? Just so you know, this was a real study, and it really, this is what it worked out. So 2 things that jump right out at me. Number one, for 3 years, they can anticipate stability here, not
Correct.
1 year and let's jump to a new plan or jump to a new carrier or go back in, and our employees hate this when we do this every year and yada, yada, yada.
Absolutely.
Now you can say, hey, we got this locked and loaded. Mm-hmm. Here it is. And you said they were able to do a gold plan.
Correct.
Well, now, the gold level across the board is one of the richer benefit plans that are available. So, I mean, if you were able to, so this is always the other concern. Are we going to decrease benefits? The employees immediately go, they're going to change our benefits again. And no, what would that message be like to be able to walk, we're going to raise you all to a level called gold, okay? And that had to be impactful.
Absolutely. And we go alongside that employer so we can demonstrate that, because we don't want them to jump into a plan that's going to cost more money for those employees. We want to make sure it's even, if not better. And so when we take those benefits, we compare them to our individual policies. Now, of course, those benefits are not going to be exactly the same. But if you are offering your employee a $1,000 deductible, we're going to map them to a $1,000 deductible to make sure they're getting just as good benefits, if not better, than what they're getting today. And so we walk through that, hold their hand through that overall process with not only that employer, but as well as their broker. We pull that broker into these conversations as well. And so we want to make sure everybody is educated, because this is a new dynamic. This is a new concept, totally different from traditional group plans. So we want to make sure everybody understands what they're changing to, but not only giving them the level of benefits that they're used to, but also giving them some savings at the same time. So again, an overall strategy for those employers.
So immediately the HR person's going, oh my God, I'm going to have a nightmare of work on my hands. Look what they're going to come to me and make me do.
Absolutely.
But address this.
No, yes. The good thing about this is that when that plan switches over, we have a whole team that helps them get enrolled. We go through the benefits. So that HR employer now does not have to worry about getting those employees enrolled in the right plan, answering benefit questions, answering claims questions. They don't have to do any of that anymore. The only thing that they would have to do is let us know new employees, when those employees start, when an employee is terminated, and then we handle the rest. That's all they have to worry about.
So that's really interesting, so you understand this, because these are individual health insurance plans that each employee signs up for. Okay, we'll talk a little about some of the differences there in a minute. But the point is, they're an individual plan. So if they have a problem, a claim didn't get paid or the provider's not in the network, whatever it is, they're calling Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Nebraska saying, I need to get this fixed. Well, Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Nebraska has world-class customer service, and they have had for a long time, like many of the Blue Cross plans. So that whole burden comes off of the employer and the HR director. And a lot of times in small businesses, the HR director, for instance, how many times as a broker when I was doing this, I had a husband and wife owned a small business, and guess who got to do the benefits? It wasn't the husband. Okay? It was the wife, because she understood it, and she was the one who was taking care of the employees. But I mean, just lifting that burden off of them and saying, here, you don't have to do, there's no reason to think you're going to have to do more work. Actually, you're going to do a lot less work.
Correct. Since we have employees in over 50 states who's going to help them get enrolled, we're going to look at their doctors. Okay, if you have a doctor in this area, making sure that doctor is still in the network. If you have pharmacy benefits that you want to make sure you're still getting your prescription drugs, we handle all of that legwork to make sure that employee is getting into the right plan for their family, and they're not going to see any difference in that.
And
coverage.
in this case, this employer had out-of-state employees, so then they had access to all the Blue Cross providers in their area with a plan called Blue Card. Am I right?
Correct.
Okay.
So for, especially if you have an employee who lives in Nebraska, some of the information that we receive based on employers' feedback is like, hey, we're used to PPO plans. We're used to the Blue Card. And so we've added benefits in our market in Nebraska to say, hey, if you still want to have access to that PPO, you can have access to that and take that with you if you're traveling outside of Nebraska.
But for employers that have employees outside the state, like this group, you're still able to offer full Blue Cross plan with PPO or however they choose to set it up.
And it is based on whichever state that they're in.
Right.
And so they would have that broad network within that state. They can have Blue Card coverage in that state. And so we definitely help them go through that and determine what's the best plan for them. Because a lot of times, once they know that they're able to get coverage in the state of Iowa, for example, right, they might not travel at all. So they're good with the broad network that's in Iowa. Same with if they're in Florida. We look at what plans are available to them in that state and make sure that they're getting access to the doctors that they're used to from their traditional group plan.
This just has so many positives.
Yes.
For an employer. And we haven't spoken to brokers much on this broadcast, but I will tell you, if you're a broker out there, you really do need to take a look at this, because you could be doing your client a lot of good, and it also stabilizes your book instead of dealing with those 25, 27, 20, was this one 24% increase they
Correct.
got?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And you reduce that down to a level like this where they don't have to deal with that anymore. The broker's going to come out at a hero. And if you're an employer, I mean, really, after what all you've heard here on this broadcast today, and you're tired of these increases and tired of having to readjust, and okay, well, let's move it over here to this carrier this year because their rates are lower, or over here to this carrier this year, or within the plan to another one, or cost shifting by raising deductibles, copay. This eliminates all of that. Mm-hmm. I mean,
Absolutely.
Really, when you think about it, this is really a remarkable model. The defined contribution, the stability of price, the offering to all the employees to pick one of 17 plans.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's pretty remarkable. It really sounds like a great opportunity.
Yes, and from Blue Cross and Blue Shield said, hey, allow us to help you and your employees get the full experience. We can help give you the quote, walk through all of those steps, and make sure that this is the right solution for you and your employees.
And it may not be for everybody, but for a lot of employers, it is. And in this particular case, this employer with about 100 and some employees saved $254,000 and gave them better benefits on a gold plan than what they had before. If you want information, the phone number 888-391-8532. 888-391-8532 in Nebraska, or the website nebraskablue.com, nebraskablue.com. We'll be right back after the break to wrap up the show. Stay tuned. We've got more right here on America's Healthcare Advocate. Welcome back. You're listening to America's Healthcare Advocate Show, broadcasting coast to coast across the USA here on the ICHRA Radio Network. My producers, Mr. Garner Cowdery and Dave Thiessen. Remember, all these shows are up on the 16 podcast platforms and the YouTube platform. So you want to tell, maybe you hear this and you want to tell, your boss about it, or maybe the HR director. Maybe you are the HR director, whatever. This is an opportunity to go up there, listen and learn about these plans. They're the ICHRA plans in Nebraska. They are called Personal Blue. We're running the show nationally because Heather does such a magnificent job of explaining all this. Thank you very much. And there are a lot of Blue Cross and Blue Shield plans across the country that are offering the plan. So again, if you want information, 888-391-8532, 888-391-8532, or the website nebraskablue.com. All right, let's go through just some of the things that people seem to struggle with when you're talking about a new concept.
Yeah, so some of the feedback we get when we're talking about Personal Blue is, like you mentioned, is this more work for our HR department? No, it's not. We talked about that in the last segment. We help control all of that. The only thing we need from an HR is who's new and who might be terminating. We set up the contribution. We fund those accounts. So all we're doing is taking a draft from that employer. We're paying for these funds, and then that employer can turn around and do the payroll deduction just as they would on a traditional group plan.
So let's go back to that. So
Yes.
they write one check, the employer does not. You got 140 employees, I got to write 140 checks. No. Okay, so talk about how that actually takes place, because we didn't get into that.
So when we set that policy up, we say, hey, employer, based on what your contribution levels are, hey, you need to fund all of these accounts by this amount. We go ahead and pull that amount, and then they also at the same time go ahead and pull the rest of that amount. Let's say that employee purchased a plan and they still owe $300 because they wanted a $500 deductible plan, right? And their employer is only contributing up to $1,000. So maybe there's $300 left. That employer can then do payroll deduction for the remaining $300. So it's very seamless, similar to what they would do on an employer traditional group plan. So we will let them know, hey, this is the total cost per month. This is what you need to pull from that employee on a biweekly basis or a monthly basis. We help them determine what all of those funds and what that cost is going to look like.
That's really important because it simplifies the whole thing. It
simplifies it, absolutely. We give them the reporting, even with compliance type data, because that information is still required, right? We provide all of the data that they need to make sure that they're filing correctly. They're sending out the 1095B forms. We help them through that process all along the way.
So I guess you'd call that white glove treatment.
Correct. White glove treatment, absolutely. Another thing that we get back, a lot of pushback, is concerns about employees struggling to pick plans. So we have dedicated enrollers who will set up 45-minute appointments with these employees to make sure that they're walking through all of the steps to get them in the right plan, make sure their doctors are in the network and their drugs are covered. And so we do that. We make sure that we get that appointment set up with them. We also do webinars with their employees because it's really all about education. So this is not a decrease in benefits. This is just a change in benefits. And we want to make sure we help to educate those employees.
Well, in the example you gave, it's actually an increase in benefits. Yes. I mean, there could be some happy people in this deal.
Absolutely.
Because of the way that it works and the fact that it can make a big difference for these people.
And that's the biggest thing as well, because, there's always concern about the consistency of coverage. Hey, my group plan is so rich in benefits. We also have rich in benefit plans on the individual side as well. So there's gold levels, the metal levels play a part in this. Gold, silver, bronze. But as I mentioned, since those employees have choice, the 25-year-old employee may not need a gold plan, right? He only goes to the doctor once a year. So if he's not using it, it makes no sense for him to pay all of the money to use it. And so he does have the choice to step down if he wants, depending on how that contribution
So they could go to an HSA type plan or the empty nester that they're 55 years old still working. Some people, in today's world, it's not unusual. People work well past, quote unquote, the typical retirement age. I mean, I'm 76 years old and still going at it pretty strong. But and it's not to confuse Medicare, but if you're 50, 55, you don't need the same plan, as you said, as the household with 35-year-old husband and wife and 4 kids running around.
Absolutely.
Everybody gets to pick what fits them.
Correct. So there's flexibility and choice for those employees. Back in the days, I won't say back in the days. Currently, when you think about a traditional group plan, that employer is picking 2 or 3 options for all of their employees. When you're moving to a Personal Blue / ICHRA type solution, now those employees get to choose what's best for them and their family.
That's huge.
That's huge. Now you're going from 3 options to 17 different options in the state of Nebraska. And then the last thing I wanted to call out is will this type of arrangement destabilize my benefit culture? We get that question as well.
I bet.
Honestly, back to the question of more options. More options actually increase satisfaction with your employees. Giving them that control and understanding to get more control on what's best for them and their family actually increases satisfaction overall. And so you are definitely giving more control to your employees, giving more choice, giving more flexibility, more predictability. And so all of those things just help contribute to make this such a huge success with Personal Blue. And I think, again, it's a huge and a good strategy for employers who are looking to control their costs.
If you want to summarize this, how would you summarize it?
I would say more savings. These are the highlights. The
Correct.
biggest advantages for an employer and employee: more savings overall, fixed, predictable budget, right? More savings, more choice. Employees get to pick what they want. Less paperwork, right? Less work for your HR department. It's a streamlined portal. We give you a dashboard. You can have visibility into that dashboard. All you need to do is add new employees and terminate people who might have left. That's all we're asking that HR person to do. Flexible classing. We didn't touch on this a lot, but classing is an option. If you want to kind of pilot this program, and let's say you want to kind of say, okay, I have employees in Iowa. I want to keep my traditional group plan in Nebraska, but offer an ICHRA for Iowa.
I didn't know that.
You can do that.
Wow.
You can class based on part-time versus full-time. So there's options that we can kind of strategize on to make sure this is the best solution for everybody. And then the seamless end-to-end experience. We're helping you along the way. We're not throwing you in this pool to say, hey, you figure it out. We are helping you with every step of this process.
What a great job. Thank you so much for doing
Absolutely.
this. We say on this show, we're here to educate and inform. We educated you today. Better yet, Heather Rollins educated you today. And whether you're listening in Nebraska, we certainly hope you are, or whether you're anywhere else in the country, these plans can make a lot of sense to a lot of employers. Nebraska, they're called Personal Blue. They are the ICHRA model. There are Blue Cross plans offering them across the country. If you're in Nebraska, 888-391-8532. You might even talk to Heather. Who knows? 888-391-8532 or the website nebraskablue.com. nebraskablue.com. And now I'll leave you with this thought from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Americans must learn to live together as brothers and sisters. We will surely perish together as fools. Truer words were never spoken. Thank you for listening to America's Healthcare Advocate, broadcasting here coast to coast across the USA. Goodbye, America.